Good afternoon, everyone. We are ready to start. Shall we start? I see all the people with earphones. Sebayakhuluma manje. Singaqala. Abantu bakithi. Ngiyabonga. DG, you're under your previous oath. We're going to cancel. It's your turn.
Thank you, Justice Musaneke. Just a few things to clarify. DG Matsuso, you have, our scope here is limited to assisting the families to find closure and redress. I'm sure you may have seen it from the professor's report, and to determine an equitable compensation for the families. In your characterization of how these patients, as well as the families, were treated, the one example you mentioned that you went to a West facility, which was a former horse stable. There was an old lady who had to use her pension money, only to be told that the lifeless body of the relative is somewhere else in Limpopo. And there are a number of examples which you have mentioned, and other witnesses have mentioned of the treatment which they have received. Is this what a health department run, that is a government, is this what government should be meting out to the receiver of the services which is being provided?
Well, it runs contrary to the provisions of the National Health Act, because the National Health Act is premised on access to quality care, and a description of what has happened doesn't come any close to what I would describe as minimum quality. But it goes even beyond that. I mean, some of the facilities do not even meet the prescribed norms and standards of what a facility should look like in terms of Regulation 158. Most provinces issue licenses. They license facilities, private and otherwise. In particular, R158 is about licensing of private health facilities. Those do not come anywhere near what is prescribed in our Regulation 158, just in terms of infrastructure. But now, if you go beyond that and talk about the service, I can't even compare. So it's about a description of the infrastructure, the environment, but also the services that are rendered.
So, in your view, firstly, you had made reference to certain guidelines which you had formulated. Do those guidelines deal with issues such as this?
No, those guidelines are only in as far as the facilities that are for, I would describe simply for NGOs.
Yes.
What I'm describing, I think I'll go back to what I said originally, to say when you license a facility, and it's a standard facility that renders health services, you need to comply with municipality bylaws, you need to comply with provisions of the National Health Act and licensing arrangement, in particular Regulation 158.
Yes.
But you also need to comply, if it's a mental health facility, you have to comply with the provisions of the Mental Health Act. But in this particular case, for the NGOs, it's in addition. So I would say that NGOs are not normally designed to render health services. So one would imagine that in this particular case, it was for a limited scope. It should have been for a limited scope. I think they overextended that scope.
Yes. And in relation to the service, do you have anything else in place which, in terms of policies or guidelines, which you are going to put in place or propose to be put in place?
No, we have existing guidelines. We have norms and standards for various facilities and the kind of different disciplines in the manner in which they should be designed, particularly when you design a facility, a clinic, a hospital, we've got norms and standards for those. We actually have different work packages for those. But we also have norms and standards that have always applied, that should be complied with. But despite that, the Health Professions Council, there are different sets of regulations that regulate how professionals who render services must conduct themselves. Now, people who render services in NGOs are not subject to those provisions. So we have laws, we've got regulations, we've got guidelines, we've got norms and standards, and these have been gazetted, and these must be complied with.
And any oversight in place which you may have designed in terms of these policies? Do we have such specifically in relation to your NGOs?
We have two levels. If you read the Mental Health Act, it actually prescribes that the provincial head of department is the one that issues licenses, but it also goes on to describe the functions of the head of the health establishment. And in this regard, the head of a health establishment will be your CEO of a hospital. So it's very prescriptive about who does what, where, and how. The functions and the roles of a director general, for instance, would be with regard to state patients when it comes to Mental Health Act. But when it's with regard to the National Health Act, the scope is very specific. It mentions Director General specifically, Head of Department specifically, but it also goes on to say what the MEC's responsibilities are, the Minister of Health. It goes on to describe even for municipalities. This is the National Health Act. It's very, very clear what the definition of role is for each party.
So if there were to be an instance of an NGO failing to provide your most minimum and basic expected services, actions that must be taken would be against the direct line oversight body, like your DG and your junior officials or what? Against whom action must be taken in the event that such a thing occurs?
The first thing is that if you look at the licenses, the different spheres of government, our functions are defined, even though I know that the Justice earlier said we have to be careful on how we relate to the Constitution, but I just wanted to talk about this somehow to say that if at national you'd sort of intervene with regard to the performance of functions and service, there are actually provisions of the intergovernmental relations that apply, and we cannot work outside those. In fact, it says we must not encroach or usurp the powers of those other spheres. So we work collaboratively, as it was earlier described, and where norms and standards have not been complied with. And if we have to intervene, the vehicle that exists at the moment is Section 100 of the Constitution. But we've also seen, even with Section 100, that if you do not have the cooperation of the province, for instance, the executive, the officials, it is very difficult to implement Section 100. One recommendation that we got was that we probably need, like, not just Section 100, something underneath that said what the procedures should be, Justice. I'm
Yes.
sorry.
You could make a law, and I think that's what the National Health Act is. That purpose to regulate norms and standards across the length and the breadth of the country. In which event, if any province were to try and regulate the same thing, because they also have a competence, a co-competence, like health, like education, then if there is a conflict between the two laws, provincial and national, the Constitution says that we will look at whether the National Act intended to regulate the full space and to set norms and standards which apply nationally, in which event the national legislation would trump the provincial legislation. But at the same time, there are intergovernmental relationships and corporate governance which Council referred you to. So it's a little complicated thing, but in the end, if there's a real conflict between province and national has a law that covers the space, national can trump provincial. But you're right, you don't do that lightly. You don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to manage all your hospitals. You don't. Though you could notionally have the power if there's an act that allows you to do it.
Yeah.
Difficult terrain, but Council must go on and tell us what he wants to achieve with these questions.
Okay.
You're not sure where you're going.
No,
I'm
no,
not sure.
yeah.
I'm sure you know.
No. You have made mention of the fact that you were informed of or costs implications were put forth as the motivation for this project. That is to terminate the life Esidimeni contract and to de-escalate the accommodation of these patients from institutions to NGOs and so on. And from your evidence, you seem to be unsure whether this is the real reason behind that. Did I get it correctly?
Well, from what we've seen, it can't have been, even if that could have been an intention,
Yes.
we don't think that was realized from what has happened. In fact, one cannot put a human life to a cost. If you've lost human life, you can't say you've achieved whatever you had intended. And I think that's a huge cost that one would ever think about.
Yeah. So together with that, we have now, through the evidence of Mr. Masanoge, discounted claims that there was an agent, that is, it was agent to implement this project. And through the report of Dr. That is Professor Makgoba, he discounted the fact that it could have been motivated for cost-saving exercise, as you do confirm it yourself. Then what I want to know is that what steps have you taken or initiated to find out the real reasons behind this project or the termination of this project?
Well, at this stage, we had not even come to that. Our main objective and priority was to implement the recommendations of the Ombud. And those recommendations was to relocate people as quickly as possible to minimize the risk.
Yes.
I think that has been our preoccupation. In fact, if you look, this is part of implementation of the recommendation. I guess following that, we can then go back and we've already started that process because we didn't want to confine this to Gauteng only in the event that we experience this in other provinces. In fact, if I recall, again through civil society, SADC sent us information about facilities that were inappropriate in case that end. We sent our inspectors to go. But we then sent teams to go and assess every province, what the mental health services were, and based on a particular technical tool that we had developed. We also got, again, from Section 27, indicated that somewhere in Orange Farm, there were, in some church, there were some, how do you say it, mental health users that were bound in chains. We sent inspectors again. I'm just saying that we said our view, even though we're implementing the recommendations.
Yes. Outside of that.
Outside of that, we have to look at every single province and see what the status is. So we've got that report, and we've gone back to provinces to say this is the status. You need to go back and take corrective action. But I think a bigger picture is how do you protect vulnerable groups, still ensure that they have quality care. So it is what I said the minister had done. After the National Health Insurance Policy white paper was published, he also pronounced that he is going to prioritize vulnerable groups, including mental health care users, as well as those with disabilities, older persons, young women, children, as well as those who suffer from cancer.
No, thank you. So we will soon find out the real reasons behind this project.
Well, before you move away, given your seniority and given the fact that you were very much the scavenger at the end, the person who dealt with the aftermath. Just imagine a terrible war, and after that there are bodies and destroyed buildings and I don't know what else and what else and what else. So you had the advantage of hindsight. What was all this about? With the advantage of hindsight, what was happening? What was the project about? We told it's not about money. What was it about? Why did the province have to cancel that contract so precipitously? And why did they set themselves deadlines like the 30th of June? And then in April and May, they had to, if you like, evacuate everybody, for better, for worse, to places that you tell us now, all 27, did not meet the standards that the law require. Ombudsman had already told us that, and you confirmed it today. And the question must be asked, what was all this about? If not money, what?
In fact, this is...
From your hindsight, you've seen the devastation. What was it about?
Well, I can't speculate, but I can only reflect what one owner of an NGO where we went to observe the relocation, what he said. He has always existed as an NGO. He's always rendered services. He didn't have life Esidimeni, mental health care patients. He's always rendered these services. And he described this as an enterprise.
Described it as a what?
As an enterprise. And I've been wondering, how do you describe what I see as a health service as an enterprise? And I'm hoping that this is not what all of this, what this was about. I'm hoping not.
The doctor who signed all these licenses which turn out to be all legally unacceptable, invalid. The evidence suggests, which I had today, that she now was part of a process to give contracts to people to remove the dead bodies. Should we make anything out of that?
This is why I say I'm hoping they did not execute this as a business project, because this is what, it's not what health is about. Health is not a commodity of trade. Health is about looking after people. It's about care.
And the person who has to exercise control and oversight, what is the body called? Referred to in recommendation.
Mental Health Review Board?
Yes. Turns out herself to be
Masondo.
a mortuary operator.
Yes, from...
She does nothing about what clearly is a tragedy, and it turns out that she's moving bodies around and gets a contract from the HOD. Was it HOD? No, the head of the mental health unit.
Dr. Manamela, yes.
Yes. What should we make of that? I'm
I
just
think
puzzled by this pieces of evidence as I wonder what this project was about.
Well, seeing that the SIU has been alerted, I think it's a matter that requires investigation from various state entities, because it cannot be that it's not only conflict of interest, but it's also an illegal activity. Because the provisions of the Public Service Act do not allow that those who render services, those who are employed in government can also be involved in business activities.
But DG, you are indeed discounting the motive on the part of province to save money. It wasn't that, you say, is it?
No, even if that was the case, what I've seen in the manner in which the project was executed, it can't just stop with saving money. This man that owned Shama House, I hope I'm right, I can't remember the NGO, but it's an NGO that existed before. And when we're taking people away, he said, this is an enterprise. If you're going to close us down, you know, I don't know what will it mean. So I say I'm hoping that this project was not viewed in that manner, that let's give them a benefit of a doubt that it was about saving costs.
Well, the NGO could have viewed it that way. They're charging per person per day who they have to look after. But I'm interested in public officials. People like you and me who worked for the state. What were they doing?
I do not...
Because at some point we have to try and get to, that's why I keep on asking it to so many witnesses. It does leave me a little sleepless. I mean, what was so pressing about changing the lives of so many people radically? You've heard that in the process many jobs were destroyed. You heard the evidence, and you know that. What is so pressing that we do so many unlawful acts? And if not unlawful, heartless acts. Uncaring acts.
I'm hoping that the designers and those who conceptualize this will be able to perhaps clarify. I'm not in a position to even explain. I mean, from what I've seen, what I've experienced, it's inexplicable.
Counsel, re-examination? I'm sorry, you were still busy. I beg your pardon. Advocate Nguchana, sorry.
No, thank you, Justice
I
Msana.
interrupted you, but please go ahead.
No. I think that was my last question. Thank you, Justice.
Sure. Counsel Utamo, it's your turn.
Thank you, Justice. Director General, we thank you for the explanation that you gave to the families before you, to the entire nation and the world with regard to the immediate response that the government has taken in order to address and deal with the unfortunate and tragic events which this country had to experience. And it is on that note that I will not try and add more than what you have said. The explanation has been very of great assistance for everyone to understand exactly what has been done. And on that basis, I will not ask any further questions in re-examination. Thank you.
DG, is there any closing remark you want to make? Because I'm just about to release you from that chair as a witness. Is there anything else that you might care to say?
Yes, just one thing that I've said earlier, that health services are not just the competence of government. It's about non-state actors, but it's also about beneficiaries, the users of our services. If civil society has identified something, we must listen and respond. I've witnessed it and I've learned.
Ralbachame, Matsus. Katsamahante Meralibo. Okay, ma'am, thank you. Counsel for the State, your next witness, please.
Thank you, Justice. The next witness will be Director General Pindell Baleni.
While we're waiting for the witness to come, I would like to, I trust that counsel would be aware that we're having a running record of the evidence. The first day came out and required my office to assist with corrections of part of the transcription and so on. but we expect that there would be a daily running record. And if this were to be useful to council, take advantage of that. It is supplied electronically on most mornings, and obviously the easier course is for you to print it if and when you want to print it. And that will facilitate, I think, cross-examination and preparation for future witnesses. So do get in touch with Uba King of my office, who has the who receives the electronic daily record, and it can then be disseminated at a time that you may agree on.
Thank you, Justice Msineke.
Thank you, Justice. May I just take this opportunity to give an indication that the list of the witnesses on behalf of the state has been revised and it has been circulated to the parties. I also need to highlight at this point in time that after this witness, the state will call the acting head of department of the province of Gauteng, who is Dr. Kinoshi.
DG, that is the chair. Yes, Counsel, you may complete the point you're making.
I wanted to give an indication after this witness, there is another witness who has been added to the list, which has been revised and circulated to the other parties.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director General in the Office of the Premier, would you please tell me whether you'd like to take the conventional oath or an affirmation?
Justice, the conventional oath is perfect.
Conventional oath. The evidence you are about to give must be the truth and the truth only. And if so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
DG, I'd ask you just to put your full names on record, after which counsel for the state would lead your evidence.
Thank you. My name is Pindell, Director General in the Office of the Premier, Gauteng.
Thank you, DG. Counsel?
May you please just give an indication from what period were you employed as the Director General in the Office of the Premier?
DG, I want to urge you to switch on your mic and keep it on all the time.
Okay.
It'll be easier that way.
Okay. I have been Director General in the Office of the Premier since March 2015.
Director, these proceedings are pursuant to the report of the Office of the Ombudsman, which is part of the record in file 1 of the record. If you can just look for file number 1. You will note the title of the report that it relates to the death of mentally ill patients. Are you familiar with the report?
Yes, Counsel, I am.
Can you just assist these proceedings with regard to your account of at what stage did you get involved pursuant to the events arising from the report?
I got involved on the day that the Ombuds released his report on the 1st of February, when the Premier appointed me to work jointly with the Director General of the Department of Health, Ms. Matsoso, to head the remedial and implementation work of these recommendations.
And the recommendations, if you look at the report, appear at page 58. At the paginated 58, it will be written, handwritten at the top of the document. So those are the recommendations which you are tasked to attend to together with the Director General of the National Department.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. The National Director has already presented her testimony before these proceedings with regard to what the government has done in response to these recommendations. What we request you to do so that the family members which are before you, the nation and the entire world may understand what has actually been done in response thereto. And your role will only be limited to those aspects which would fall within your area from the province side, and I'll only refer you to those aspects which the National Director was not able to comprehensively deal with them. There is a report relating to the implementation which has been presented before these proceedings, and I would like to make reference to that report so that you can be able to deal with the appropriate responses which the nation is eagerly awaiting to hear from you. And in that regard, may I please refer you to page 1 of the report on the implementation, and in particular paragraph 2, where it is recorded that the Premier of the Gauteng province must, in line with the findings herein, consider the suitability of member of the Executive Council, Gredani Dorothy Mahlangu, to continue in her role as the member of the Executive Council for Health. Can you just clarify to this hearing, as the person from the office of the Premier, what steps have been taken in relation to this recommendation? And you'll note that the report on your right-hand side, there's a column for the status of what has actually been attended to. Can you then proceed in your response?
Thank you, Council. The report records that MEC Mahlangu voluntarily resigned her position on the 31st of January. My understanding was that... can I proceed? Yes, can I proceed? Okay. Thank you.
You're talking to me.
Yes.
The questions come from your right, which
Okay.
hopefully towards the left.
Thank you.
Or straight in front of you.
All right. Thank you, Justice. MEC Mahlangu resigned her position on the 31st of January, and the report was released on the 1st of February. And as the Cabinet Secretariat, we received instructions to prepare for the swearing-in of a newly appointed MEC, MEC Ramakopa, who was sworn in on the 6th of February 2017.
In light of the resignation of the former member of the Executive Council, do you know if there are any institutions which could be making any attempt to take action pursuant to this report?
At this point in time, I am not aware of that, Council. We are, however, working with the police on the investigations of all the deaths that arose as a result of the Gauteng Marathon, mental health marathon project. And one can only assume that once the police have reached conclusions about the people who are responsible, that they would be charged.
Thank you. I think that might be an opportunity for me to refer you to the other recommendation appearing at page 3.
Before you move away from there, we've heard the answer about the police. Can you provide us with any detail? Do you have an idea how far they are? You're going towards a year now ever since this incident, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you have any idea, does your office officially heard how far they are?
Yes, Justice, without purporting to be a spokesperson of SAPS, we have worked very closely with the provincial commissioner who has designated one of her deputy commissioners to attend to this matter, spearhead a team that's going to investigate these cases, and that's a deputy commissioner, General Motsepe. We have also worked very closely with the NPA in the form of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Gauteng North, who has dedicated his deputy to also supervise the prosecutors who are working on this matter. We hold monthly meetings with them to coordinate to ensure that where they need further information from the state, that is facilitated and expedited. At the last meeting we had with them, the information we had is the following, that the police have opened 76 inquiry files, and these files relate to all the reports they have received about people who have died pursuant to this process. On top of that, there are 35 that have been opened as dockets, which means that there is more information. The body is known, the family is known, and there's some aspects that are still outstanding. However, the information the police gave us was that these are at an advanced stage of investigation, and those are between the police and the NPA.
So inquiry files would be what, the preliminary stage before actual dockets are opened?
That's what the police have explained to us, Justice.
And they are aware now that there were 118 deaths. So 35 would be a third of the job.
They are aware, Justice. We are on their case all the time. We also are not happy with the pace, but we believe that they're doing the best they can. They've appointed 8 investigators on this matter, and we suspect it's quite a generous allocation of resources on the matters.
Thank you. Lastly, how did the families come to know of this progress into the future? I have the luxury of asking you the questions, but how are the families going to know what progress has been done going into the future?
In implementing these recommendations, we have, as a state, sought to work very closely with the families. There is a family committee that was formed as a result of this, the mental health marathon project. However, the Premier's office has created a direct line with the family committee together with their representatives, and we have regularly held meetings with them, and at those meetings we've dealt with various aspects of the implementation of these recommendations, and particularly when we started moving closer to the arbitration becoming a reality, we were reporting on these aspects. We will continue to hold those meetings and give reports to the family committee. However, when the family committees meet with the rest of the families, which is something they do also from time to time, and there's a specific venue that's become quite convenient for us to hold these meetings. As the Office of the Premier, we attend those meetings, and we do give progress on the matters that are under implementation.
Thank you. Counsel, President.
Thank you, Justice. I wanted to refer you to recommendation number 8, and the Justice has already asked questions relating to that recommendation. Is there anything that you would like to add in relation to recommendation number 8, which provides that the Ombudsman fully supports the ongoing South African Police Service and the forensic investigation underway. The findings and outcomes of these investigations must be shared with appropriate agencies so that appropriate action, where deemed justified, can be taken. I know that you have made responses. You may add some other information if you have not covered the response, in the response from the Justice.
The only addition is that we will continue to report to the Ombuds as the progress is being achieved. The ultimate intention here is that we should get to a point where inquests are held and determinations are made as to whether or not somebody is responsible for the death and how people died. And all of that will have to be given to the Ombuds because he did say he supports these, and there's a recommendation that talks about us reporting to him until the matter has been concluded.
Thank you, Director General. There are no further questions in examination.
Well, what about counsel, the schedule at the back? Recommendations specifically directed at the Gauteng Department of Health.
As I have indicated, Justice, the state will be calling the acting head of the department. Those aspects are within his province, and he will be able to deal with them comprehensively.
I follow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Counsel, it's your turn.
I'll be very brief, Justice Masaneke. Good afternoon, ma'am. Are you at all involved in the disciplinary processes that are to take place against officials in the Gauteng department? So that would be in relation to recommendation 3.
Yes. Counsel, the employment incidents of heads of department resort under the Premier. So to the extent that the former head of department has to face disciplinary hearings, that is driven by the Office of the Premier, and yes, I am involved in in that matter. I become indirectly involved with the disciplinary recommendation number 4, Director Manamela, because we took a decision to join those proceedings, those disciplinary proceedings, given that they arise out of the same facts. But for the direct authority of the discipline of Director Manamela, that would be the acting head of Department of Health, including for those other recommendations of officials in the Department of Health.
Are there any other actions that are being taken against those 2 officials, apart from disciplinary proceedings?
Council, to the extent that you possibly are looking at the recommendation 5 that talks about referring the findings against Dr. Namela and Dr. Silebano to their respective professional bodies, we are aware of that recommendation. However, we took a position that we should finish the disciplinary processes and then refer to the professional councils once the disciplinary proceedings have been finalized.
And other than the HPCSA, there aren't any investigations in relation to those 2 officials?
Not that I'm aware of, other than the fact that the SIU is also investigating this matter. The Human Rights Commission is also investigating the matter. SAPS is, so to the extent that they would be implicated, they would be investigated thereunder. Yes.
Thank you.
But I can also add that the disciplinary proceedings, at the moment, they are suspended pending the appeal against the findings of the Ombuds. Both Dr. Silebano, the former HOD, and Director Manamela have filed appeals. So we have started the proceedings. They were suspended. The charge sheets were served. We are ready to, the proceedings have set, but were postponed just to give them an opportunity to finalize the appeal. So we are ready to go with the proceedings once the appeal court, the tribunal that the minister has set up finalizes those matters.
Thank you. In the meantime, in the interim, are they on suspension with or without pay?
They are on suspensions in accordance with the code applicable to public servants, you suspend people with pay until you have reached a finality on their disciplinary. So they were both suspended on the 8th of February 2017.
In respect of the former MEC, we've heard from, we've seen it from, in fact, the day of the release of the report on 1st February 2017, yes, when it was first announced that the MEC had resigned. Yes. And it, I must say, it came as quite a big surprise to many people after all of the drama, after all of the battles, after all of the defensive posture from the former MEC, that all of a sudden there was a resignation, and that resignation was timed to be the day before the release of the report. Are you, in the office of the Premier, well, let me ask this first question. Was the former MEC paid?
Her salary?
Well, when she resigned, was there an agreement? Was there any form of financial arrangement that eased her exit?
I do not have knowledge of that. However, members of the Executive Council are political appointees appointed in accordance with the Constitution, and the Constitution says when they resign, that's it. That's their authority, and their term of office ends when they leave office.
Yes, their authority will end when they leave office. My question, you don't know the answer. Do you know who would know that? The answer to the question.
You want to know whether there was a sweetener package when she left, is that it?
That's the question, yeah.
Yeah.
And in what amount?
Yeah, I don't.
Yes. DG, do you know the answer?
I do not know the answer. They are paid, the salaries of political office bearers are paid by Treasury, and I can double check with Treasury if there's any special amount that was paid. However, she, as an MEC, would have accounted to the Premier, and that would be the person who would have
Well,
directly
counsel
managed.
could be more rigorous. He could say, why did she resign? Was she pushed? Did she jump? Was she paid a sweetener? I mean, these are the possibilities, right?
Yes.
So the question really goes to that.
Yes.
It says, how did it happen?
That's where that Chinese wall exists between administrators and politicians. So that was a matter that was managed politically by the Premier and the party to which they belong. So and I cannot say much about it.
So you don't know why she resigned?
I can guess why she resigned, but that wouldn't be good enough for this session. So I'd rather say for sure as to why she resigned, I cannot say, because that's a matter that was managed politically between the Premier and the political party.
So there were discussions between the Premier and the MEC before her resignation?
Ma'am, I can only assume that that would have been the case.
And just to confirm, and you don't know whether there was a sweetener?
I do not know.
On the question of her authority, yes, she doesn't have authority now that she's no longer in that office. But does that mean she no longer has any responsibility, public responsibility, to be accountable for the actions and for her decisions during the time when she was in office?
She remains accountable, I suspect, for decisions and actions during her tenure.
Will the office of the Premier be holding her accountable? And if so, how?
We will be holding her accountable. So once the investigations of the police have come out and it becomes necessary for her to be brought back to come and testify or face charges, we will assist the police in whatever way we can to make sure that she is brought back to common account.
Has the Office of the Premier requested her presence in these proceedings? Has there been any communication with her to say that she is requested to attend and provide evidence at these proceedings?
No, she wasn't requested to come and attend. And the reason was that she cannot come and represent government when she behaved in a manner that doesn't align, that doesn't fit with how government would have treated this matter and how it wants to relate to the world post this matter. She was the one who committed all the wrongs. She's out of the system. In a sense, she was perceived as a potentially hostile witness, and therefore she was not called to come and represent government because it was felt she wouldn't represent government properly.
Do you think she should be here?
Yes.
You know, it's one thing to say that you don't
Yes.
want to call her, but
Yes.
do you think she should be here?
I do believe that she should be here.
Are there any? She's a senior member. I mean, as you said, there are political appointments and then there are administrative appointments and there's a Chinese wall in the way people are dealt with, but she was a representative of government. She wasn't just a member of a political party for the time that she held the office of MEC. But I accept your answer. My question, though, in relation to that is whether there are any disciplinary proceedings or investigations in her political movement, in the political party.
Council, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware if there are any.
And just to confirm, you say that the correct person to pose the questions to regarding the reasons for MEC Mahlangu's resignation and for the conditions under which that took place is the Premier.
Yes.
Directly.
Yes, Council.
And he will be coming to these hearings. Is that right?
He will be, yes.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ms. Baleni.
Thank you so much. Legal Aid South Africa.
Thank you, Justice Masaneke. DG, I'm from the Legal Aid South Africa. We are representing the survivors from this project which was taking place, which led us to be here today in these proceedings. I won't be that long, but I won't ask many questions. The issue about, I know you agree that the Premier is the provincial head of the executive. Am I correct?
Yes, Council.
So if there is issue about the cost-saving mechanisms, the policy, there is nothing that he becomes alerted about that? Or is he just being kept in the dark, or the issues are directed to the National Treasury or the provincial relevant department?
The Premier would be alerted during a process of determining budgets, which is called the Premier's Budget Council, and it is at those sessions that happen once a year. In fact, as we speak, we're having those sessions, and that's where issues of cost-cutting and budgeting are finalized.
In the briefings about the budget of 2015 for the following year, which was going to be 2016, there was no issue about that life Esidimeni contract. I mean, we will not be extended the following year, which was going to be the end of March 2016.
No, there was no issue raised around cost cutting that would include termination of contracts where services such as these are provided. And on life Esidimeni specifically, no.
You've already mentioned that your office became involved. When was your office became aware of what transpired actually after this?
I can state when we got aware. The question this side was, when did you get involved?
All right. Let me put it that way. When did you become aware?
I became aware of this matter after a response by MEC Mahlangu to a question that was, former MEC Mahlangu, to a question that was asked in the legislature by a member of the DA. And this was in September. In fact, as we're preparing and one looked for the date specifically, I think the response was provided on the 13th of September, 2016, wherein she stated a number of 36 people who had died as a result of the marathon project.
We heard from the previous witness, DG from Health, that one civil society organization contacted her office around October, if I'm not mistaken, October 2015. So there was nothing which was communicated to your office regarding that?
No, Council. Nothing was communicated.
Again, in December, the 22nd of December 20, that very same year, there was even a court case where the Department of Health of the the Department of Health, it falls under the ambit of the National Department of Health. So the Office of the Premier, again, regarding that case, was never became aware of it.
Well, there are at least 3 questions there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chief Justice.
I think you want to break them. Does the Provincial Department of Health fall under the National Department? That's the one question. The second is the activities of the National Office. Are there activities that we are aware of? At least 2 of questions can be asked in that broken up way. But please go ahead so the witness can give you effective answers.
Thank you, Justice Mosenek. Perhaps let me ask it directly. The case which was in the High Court in December 2015, the Office of the Premier was there at any stage when it became aware that there are issues which involves the issues which were raised regarding the closure or intended closure of one of the mental health facility in his province? Was there anything which came to his office?
Nothing came to our office, so we did not see the court case, and it's certainly a point we're not proud about, because once matters get to court, the Premier's office should be involved and informed. However, in this particular instance, we were not.
Interestingly, the officials under the Department of the Premier of the province, they were in court, but nothing was communicated to his office at all regarding that case.
Not as far as I'm aware. I did not personally become aware of the case.
Thank you. As much as we appreciate that the stance taken by the government regarding this matter, there is issue about proactiveness. Yes. In this matter, definitely proactiveness was really necessary on the part of the state. There was a ticking bomb which was about to explode at any time. But it's very strange that the Office of the Premier, for some reason that we do not know, was not made aware of any Can you comment about that?
Unacceptable as that is, it is the truth. We have also gone and done some soul searching about how could we have been missed by such a massive and a tragic situation until it became so involved and so tragic.
Are there any measures that you can state, if you can, because I know you've got other principles and other. Are there any measures which we can be assured that to the families of the survivors whose relatives are still in these public health mental health institutions, nothing of this tragic will never happen to them?
We have put up a few measures to ensure that we up our proactive mechanisms of being able to pick up problems that exist in departments in general in Gauteng, given that the Premier's office bears the responsibility of coordination of the work of the departments. But in relation to mental health specifically, two things have been done. The Department of Health reports at every Executive Council meeting now on progress in that area and how they are performing in that area. Secondly, the Premier is in the process of putting together an advisory council on mental health so that he is also got a second layer of assurance. There is the normal mental health review board that is established under the Act by the department to assist the MEC. However, the Premier is establishing another advisory committee so that he can then be assured and be advised by specialists as to how Gauteng is doing in the management of mental health in general.
Thank you. Justice Mosneke, further questions?
Yes, thank you so much. Shall we move on then to Advocate Groenewald?
So, Justice Mosneke, may I beg your indulgence?
Yes.
And it relates to a question that my colleague put to DG Pindell, which has an answer, and it's not the answer that was provided by the witness. And it's on the record, and may I refer to it with your permission?
Certainly.
It's in relation to the litigation against the government, let's say, on this, the December 2015 litigation. And it was, in fact, brought to the attention of the Premier in 2015. And the Premier was moreover cited in those proceedings. The Premier was the fourth respondent. Mm-hmm. Would you like me to refer you?
Please.
Let me do so. It's page 91 of file 1. That's the notice of motion, and the Premier is cited as a fourth respondent. Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can confirm that, Council.
And if you then turn to page 398 of the same file, do you see the notice of intention to oppose?
Yes, I do see it, Council.
And if you read the notice of intention to oppose, the legal representatives designated there, who are Ngqebecha Madlanga Incorporated, give notice that the first, second, and the fourth respondents will be opposing the application, the fourth respondent being the Premier. Were you aware, do you still maintain you were not aware of this litigation at the time?
I still maintain I wasn't aware of it. If possible, I can check with the legal team from the Premier's office if they ever gave instructions to Ngqebecha attorneys to respond. But personally, I wasn't aware.
So as you know it, at this point in time, you're not aware of an instruction that was given to oppose from the Premier's office?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Council.
And who would know if there was an instruction given? Because it would take an instruction before you could draw up a notice like this.
The head of the State Law Advisory Services would know if such an instruction was given. I can check with them and make sure and give this arbitration that response. That's how we issue instructions.
Would it be possible for you to get that answer as to whether
Yes, it's possible.
there was an instruction? And if there was an instruction,
Okay.
from whom? And why it is that the Premier's office saw fit to oppose the application? And also, given then, apart from the opposition, if you could answer why the fact that this litigation brought the issues to the knowledge of the Premier, why nothing took place at that point from the office of the Premier?
Justice, I would have to go and verify this. I cannot answer it. I was not cited in the sense that I didn't see these papers.
Yeah.
I would have to double check with my legal team around this area.
Thanks. If we could have those answers to those 5 questions.
And what is on page 419? Council.
Page 419, on my...
418 and 19.
There's a part of the answering affidavit. The answering affidavit in the same litigation which had been provided by Mr. Lebete.
But look at 419 is a notice to abide.
419.
419. Well, it might be old pagination 419. Go to 508 in present pagination. There's a double pagination there. Can you see it?
Yes, I do see that. Page 509.
509.
This litigation is it's the same litigation.
I'm not on top of the papers in the application, but I'm just drawing attention. The one says the Premier will oppose, the other one says the Premier will abide. But both are matters of instruction. It doesn't take the point away, but I don't know what that means, that
The difficulty is just...
what that notice to abide means.
It doesn't even say... It's signed by the attorneys for the first, second, and fourth respondent. So it doesn't make sense that the text of the notice simply says, notice to abide by the decision of the court.
Yeah. And at the bottom it says, of course, attorneys for the fourth respondent. I'm just following up on your
Yes,
question.
no, I understand. Certainly we know that there was no intention on behalf of the first and second respondent to abide.
Yeah.
We proceeded with litigation right until the doorsteps of court. So perhaps if we could get clarity on what the meaning of that notice is too. I can't make sense of it myself.
Did you get to the paper I'm talking?
Yes,
what I'm referring to?
I did, Justice. I can see it.
Yeah.
But again, the response would be, I am not aware that we gave instructions to these people
You
to
have to go and
represent the
do some
Premier's.
homework
I have to go and do my homework and come
know
back.
more.
Yes.
And you're going to get the time because we won't be done with you by the time we adjourn.
Okay.
So
If
you'll have time for the homework.
If I may point out also one other peculiarity,
Yes.
and that is the notice of intention to oppose. That it's dated. I know it's signed as being received on the 21st of December. The print is very unclear.
You're back to page 91, are you?
Yes, it's on page 398, the notice of intention to oppose.
Oh,
It's dated on the 20th of December 2015,
yes.
and the notice to abide appears to be 21st December 2015, and that can't be right.
Yeah, that's pretty confusing. The one opposes, one abides.
Yeah.
Anyway, it struck me and I thought I'd draw attention to it.
Thank you, I
I don't know
appreciate
what that
it.
means. But it doesn't take away the fact that there was some service, and there'll be an explanation whether principals look at these papers and whether he was aware, actually aware. But it's something that the DG will have to tell us tomorrow. The point remains good. Yeah.
That's all, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
You've had a second bite, so you owe one to your colleagues, all of them. Because here we normally have one bite, except if you are leading the witness.
I fully understand. I couldn't contain my tongue on that
Very well.
response.
You don't owe me, you owe all your colleagues. If they were to ask for a second bite. Very well. We have to go. You were done, Mr. Skibi, with your cross-examination, were you? You were done. And that just gets us to move on to Mr. Groenewald. It was your turn when you were interrupted, sorry.
Thank you very much, Justice. Ms. Beleni, I have just a few questions for you. For the sake of the family members that's here, in your opinion, what's the options of a premier when he has an MEC that contravenes the law or does something that is not legitimate, not fair? What is the options of the Premier? What can the Premier do to such an MEC?
He's got the option of firing them, disappointing them in that way, disappoint, not disappointing. So if the person if an MEC doesn't oblige the law, does not oblige the commitments of the Premier and his posture, and in this case, perhaps when I was saying that the MEC could not have been, the former MEC could not have been called, the Premier does not associate himself with the manner in which this project was executed, right from the planning through its implementation, and therefore, because he disagreed with it, we did not see our way clear to inviting her here as a witness, but as I say, she still must come here and account for herself. So one of the options is definitely to fire and to then report to the various structures which such instances have to be reported. And in this case, I think the Premier has made it clear that he would want this matter investigated thoroughly by all agencies. He is the one who signed the letter to the SIU requesting them to come in and investigate anybody, everybody who was involved, who's accountable, who's responsible, who's criminally or otherwise responsible. They must be investigated and further steps be taken against them. There is another instance in Gauteng where an MEC did something the Premier did not agree with. The person was taken out, reported to the Integrity Commissioner, and they are no longer an MEC.
In respect of the HOD and Dr. Monamela, you say that their disciplinary actions have been suspended and you are waiting the outcome of the appeal against is it the Ombudsman's report?
Yes, Council.
Now again, just for the sake of the family members that's here, I'd just like to find out what can the outcome of that appeal be? will that mean that the Ombudsman's report and some of the recommendations are nullified, scrapped, amended?
Through you, Mr. Justice. Yes. I find the question to be unfair to the witness about what she thinks of what the outcome might be. It's a matter which is not within her capacity to make that determination. She can only rely on the outcome when it is made. So for this witness to be pushed or answers sought in relation to matters which do not fall within her capacity, it will really be unreasonable to expect an answer.
Justice, perhaps just to clarify my question, I'm not asking the witness to preempt the outcome of the appeal. I'm just asking what is the possible consequences of that outcome. So with the outcome of the appeal, might that possibly be that the Ombudsman's report is amended? I mean, that's quite extreme. Or that some of the recommendations be nullified and say, well, we're not going to do this. So,
can we start with some detail about the appeal process before moving to the appeal? I understand your point.
Yes.
Reformulated the question might be good. As it stands, it is open to an objection. So what I thought you might want to inquire from the witness, what is the nature of the appeal before body does it serve? Does it have the power to accept these findings? And then comes the speculative part.
thank you,
I'm
Justice.
upset myself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And with the rugby top, you're a big man, eh? I must remember that. So, if you could just ask a few factual questions and then get to the speculative part.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Justice. DG, before whom is the appeal currently? Who's considering the appeal?
Okay. The appeal is before former Judge Mwepe, who was constituted as a tribunal by Minister Motsoaledi under a section in the Mental Health Act, in the National, I think the National Health Act, that, or the act in terms of which the Health Ombuds is established, provides for a review of the decisions of the Ombuds. And the former HOD, together with a few other people, have revoked their right to appeal the findings of the Ombuds.
There are 3 in total that have appealed.
My information is that there are 3 officials plus an NGO that have filed appeals.
Now, in respect of what is the appeal, do you know, against of the totality of the report or just the findings in respect of themselves?
I haven't seen their papers. Those papers were filed directly with the tribunal that the minister established.
Now, do you know that tribunal that considers the appeal? Do you know what's the power of that tribunal? What possible outcomes can they deliver and give?
The powers of that tribunal are written in the Act, and I didn't look at the Act before I came in here. But I think it's a Section 81 of the Act under which the Ombuds is established. The powers of the minister and or the tribunal are clearly stipulated therein.
Okay. So, but there is an outcome, and there might be consequences, or there might be, yeah, let's don't further speculate on that. We will provide the evidence on that. You now suspend the disciplinary action pending the outcome of that appeal. We all know that that outcome would only relate, or will only be in respect of the Ombudsman's report and his findings, or whatever it is that they are appealing against. But will you agree with me that the disciplinary action that you will institute against these individuals it might be based on the Ombudsman's report, but it cannot solely rely on the Ombudsman's report. The employer will have to do its own investigation, formulate a bundle of documents, provide the employee with the charge sheet, and then provide the evidence that shows that that employee contravened Act, Code of Conducts, and so on. And then the chairperson would make a finding. And that finding can be dismissal, would be guilty or not guilty, irrespective of the Ombudsman's report. You agree with me?
I agree with you, Counsel.
Now, why then, ma'am, are the disciplinary actions suspended?
The disciplinary action has not been suspended. It is postponed.
Postponed, suspended, postponed.
It is postponed. The charge sheet was formulated definitely quite independent of the Ombuds's findings, precisely because we were aware of that possibility. However, we took advice from our counsel in that matter, and we know that the labor law jurisprudence tends to favor the employee or the weak one. There are issues of fairness that often are considered, and fairness in those cases are slightly specific, different from other cases. The fear we had was to power ahead with the disciplinary and lose the case on a technicality where somebody has committed such a grave wrong that needs to be dealt with and dealt with comprehensively. It was a call that we have made, and we believe that it was a call that was based on rational grounds. We proceeded as fast as we could to ensure that we start the disciplinary case. The report of the Ombuds came out on the 1st of February. On the 8th of February, the individuals were suspended. The notices were served on them, then they were out of the offices and out of the system. Charge sheets have been served on time in accordance with the Code of Conduct of Public Servants, and everything has been done on time. It was just a question of fairness. Do you proceed, power ahead, risk losing a good case on a technicality?
Ma'am, consideration of fairness. Fairness towards these 2 employees or 3 employees. Behind me sitting family members of 118 people. Where's the fairness towards them? Where's the accountability? Where's the responsibility? And I would close off on this subject to say that there is no basis in law for you to have postponed the disciplinary action. You can proceed. And I submit that you must proceed, because these 2 individuals, ma'am, has caused anguish, pain, sorrow. I mean, the evidence is quite clear that they played a central role in this whole process. In respect of those individuals that's at number 6 of the recommendation, once again, and this is just to get clarity and questions that's been asked by the family members, you can just give your opinion. Here we have, again, people that played a central role in this program. Yet they get a final written warning. Is that fair? Is that justice?
Dr. Kinoshi will deal with this recommendation in detail. However, I sat in a meeting at which we were informed that the executive authority is not happy with these sanctions and therefore is taking them to Labour Court for a review. And this is precisely because we do not believe that these people should be treated with
Well, that is very good news, ma'am. I must be honest with you. If that's in fact what the department is going to do, you know, we would definitely, yeah, it's very good news for the families. It's just a technical issue there, and perhaps I hope my mathematics is correct there. I think there was 9 people identified by the Ombudsman. You indicate there 4 of the 6 cases that are proceeding. We're giving, it seems to me that it's not quite clear what happened to the previous CEO of CCRC, and it's also not quite clear what happened to the previous acting CEO of CCRC. Do you know what happened to them?
Justice, with your permission, can I not respond to this question? Dr. Kinoshi is the one who's dealing with this matter, the acting head of the Department of Health.
100%.
He can talk
It's a
with
legitimate
authorities.
answer. The witness defers to somebody who has direct knowledge on the matter.
We have no problem with that,
Very well.
Justice. Ma'am, you testified that you have a direct line to the SAPS and the Deputy Provincial Commissioner and so on. You are involved, intricately involved in the investigation by the SAPS. You get briefed by them and so on.
Yes, we do get briefed.
Do you know whether or not the SAPS has taken a warning statement or statement from either the Mrs. Maslangu, the previous MEC, or Dr. Celebano or Dr. Manamela?
Again, I'm being asked to speak on behalf of another authority. The update I get through the meetings we've had here is that they still haven't interviewed those people.
They still haven't
Interviewed
them?
Yes.
So it's just a sec. Thank you, Justice. No more questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. DG, I'm going to, you still have one more counsel, but you also have me. I have a number of questions about numbers.
Okay.
Numbers are going to matter here.
Yes.
This is a case, in the end, it will also be about equitable redress. And we need to know a lot about, with precision, about who would be entitled to equitable redress. If you say to me, Dr. Kinoshi will do it, that's fine. Let me ask the questions each by each. And you can respond to every one of them, and if you can't, we can ask him. 1, the number of the ombud of 118. What do you say about that? What is the level of that precision?
The level of precision with that number, as far as I'm aware, Justice, is up to the 1st of February. That is the number of deaths that the Ombuds was able to verify.
When the Ombud testified, Counsel for Section 27 put to him that the 11 deceased people who were at Esidimeni, who are not on the schedule that the Ombud gave us. What do we do with that? Are we 118 or are we 129?
Sure. Again, Justice, can I beg to defer that to Dr. Kinoshi, because I know that he's got an explanation that has been given in various meetings, yes.
You'll be able to do that.
However, I think the principle is that everybody who was affected by this project must be treated fairly and redressed.
Yes.
Therefore, if records have to be amended to include those who were genuinely left out, that should happen.
We have evidence before us that there are still at least 7 corpses
Yes.
of people, mental health care users, which have not been identified or linked to families.
Yeah.
How do they stack up with 118 or 129?
Again, it's a matter that I'd rather Dr. Kinoshi responds to. My information is that when the Department of Health gave us the numbers, it included those bodies. It's bodies that have not been claimed by their families. However, some of them, there are names, and he can even tell you which parts of Gauteng they
So
came
they've been
from.
accounted for, they've been identified, but only families. But you say you defer to him. He
Yes.
rather comes and gives us the detail.
Yes, Justice.
Let's move on to some more numbers. The post-mortem
Yes.
schedule lists people far, much fewer than 118 or 129.
Yes.
What should I make of that? Why is that so, and what does it mean?
Justice, possibly the reason for that is that in a number of instances, the people who died were buried without families asking for postmortems, or even buried by the NGOs without the knowledge of families, without postmortems being asked for. So possibly where we have to get to the causes of deaths and people were buried before without the families knowing, and or families feel that those people must be exhumed, that might be indicated.
You see, the number is low and it has some significance, and here is the significance. Before I tell the significance, if you look at the report and the number of, let me take you to the 11th paragraph, dealing with SAPS, they've opened only 35 dockets.
Yes.
And yet 118 people have passed on. So the question must be, do they have post-mortem reports to be able to prove death? And why are the dockets only 35 when the deaths are at least 118?
Justice, the best explanation that's possibly on the table is that in some instances, the people have been buried. And they were buried without postmortems being done. The
But
police
the solace
graduate,
is we have identified them. We have identified them.
we have identified them?
Those who have been buried without post-mortem examinations have nonetheless been identified.
Yes, Justice.
In those circumstances, how does one prove death?
From the information that we gathered, we have received death notices, or death notices have been found in the records of some of the mortuaries, and some forms that were completed by medical officers, but not full-on post-mortem reports.
So in every case that there was a burial, there would at least be a burial order with details of the person who had died. Is that it?
That's the information I have, Justice.
And that's how the identity was ascertained.
Yes, Justice.
And Dr. Kinoshi will be able to help with that.
Yes, Justice.
Okay. Let's move on to something else that... how many survivors are there? And who are they?
Justice, I think this is
This is
another
very
one.
basic number crunching.
I know, Justice, but it's a matter that I'd again rather leave to Dr. Kinoshi, because between Dr. Kinoshi and DG Matsuso, they drove the process of relocation of patients. Dr. DG Matsuso did phase 1, Dr. Kinoshi did phase 2.
Yeah.
So they have the
And
numbers.
DG Matsuso said, well, Dr. Kinoshi, okay.
Yes,
You also say Dr. Kinoshi.
I'm saying Dr. Kinoshi, Justice.
Okay. And it's plain, DG, we need
Yes.
to know the number of survivors and who are they.
Yes. we have some numbers that add up, but as I say, I'd rather Dr. Kinosha comes here and shows you how he works from 1712 that was discharged to where we are now, which should be basically those who are alive, those who are deceased, should add up to the number that was discharged.
Who
But
would
he's got
know
the details.
the number of additional rands that were paid as a result of the marathon project? Is there anybody in your department or within province who can say what the financial cost has been and in which respect?
Yes, the Department of Health should be able to do that, Justice. So acting HOD, Dr. Kinosha, but the Treasury can also be invited to come here if that's needed.
To calculate the cost of the aftermath of the
project.
marathon.
Yes.
And that will be from the point where it was ordered to stop. In other words, when the report came out.
Yes. That Dr. Kinosha is able to give you, Justice.
Yes, and that's besides the cost connected and related to this process.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I put to you the numbers that are worrying me. They continue to worry me. What's left is one advocate and your own advocate. So it may be that we could help you away. It's 4:20. Counsel, it's your turn. I'm just worried I wouldn't have put my numbers to this witness and she goes away and I forget about them, being an old man, so I've done my bit.
No, thank you, Justice Moseneke. We also had questions about those numbers, but Advocate Yina will take over.
Okay.
I'll take the honors.
Thank you, Justice. Good afternoon, DG.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
I'd like you to put your name on record, please.
Thank you, Justice. I am Nonhlanhla Yina. I'm one of the evidence leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
DG, part of the healing process is to get clear and logic explanations for the families.
Yes.
Yes. My questions would relate to the knowledge. You answered to one of my learned friends that you only became aware of this project in September 2016. Is that correct? Yeah. Is that correct?
Yes, 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 Counsel.
Yes. If I may refer you to page 164 of Volume 1, Justice. That would be the termination of contract between the Department of Health and Life Esidimeni. Now, if you have regard to page 166, the date that appears on the notice is 29 September 2015.
Yes.
Can you
yes.
see that?
Yes, I can see it, Counsel.
So you are telling this tribunal that you only became aware of this project a year after the contract was terminated.
Yes, Counsel, that's what I'm saying, and that is because the Premier's office doesn't get involved in procurement decisions of departments. The PFMA is clear about that.
Okay. And then if you could also go to page 167 of the same bundle. Do you recognize that document?
I see it now for the first time, yes.
Can you explain what is that document?
The document is headed Gauteng Health terminates life healthcare Esidimeni contract. It's got a South African flag and it looks like it comes from a government website.
Yes. So you don't get to receive those communications. It looks like a newsletter. Because it says, just above where it says Gauteng Health terminates life healthcare Esidimeni contract, it says home newsroom media statement. That's a media statement. You didn't get it?
I didn't get it.
Do you usually
Counsel.
get media statements from the province?
No.
Isn't it strange that your office, the Office of the Premier, and the Gauteng Department of Health office are both situated in Johannesburg? And a project that attracted the attention of the whole world doesn't come to the attention of the Premier for the whole year. Isn't that strange? Do you wish to comment?
Unfortunate as that is, Council, those are the facts. We can't mislead families and pretend that we got information earlier. We got the information when, at least on my part, September 2016.
Now, can you tell this tribunal if the Office of the Premier does exercise some oversight over the Gauteng Provincial Department of Health, if at all?
Yes, some oversight.
In what form?
The form takes ex post facto reports that are filed quarterly by the departments with the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation of the Provincial Department.
So are you telling this arbitration that during the period of September 2015 up to September 2016, you did not have those quarterly meetings in the form of reporting? This project was not submitted or was not brought to the attention of the Premier in the form of those quarterly meetings?
The project was not, ma'am. The one report that the Premier's office got was at the Executive Council of February 2015, where the report, no, 2016, and it was part of a report by the Department of Health on their turnaround strategy. And all that was reported on mental health was that mental health is proceeding well, it's supported by specialists, and patients are kept in state institutions. And it's a small paragraph in a report that they presented at the Exco Lekgotla. Specifically on life Esidimeni, there wasn't anything about the termination of the contract.
Is it Exco Lekgotla of the province?
Yes, Justice.
Or of the ruling party of the province?
Of the province. This is the Executive Council.
The Executive Council of, okay.
Yes, in February 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justice. Surely the Gauteng Department of Health would have required, or they did actually require, budget for this project. So that also didn't come to the attention of the Premier.
Ma'am, the line item on mental health would have been in the ordinary budget of the Department of Health as one of the programs, mental health, but not specificities of life Esidimeni contract termination. We need more money. No, that did not come through.
But you would agree that that is quite strange. This was a huge project. It was the first of its own kind in the whole nation. It is quite strange that the Premier didn't know about it for the period of 1 year. It is quite strange. Do you agree?
I agree, ma'am.
Now, as part of your account, as part of your accounting purposes, did you get the details that is now after you had acquired the knowledge? That is you as the Office of the Premier. Did you get the details of the budget that was allocated for this project?
We got a broad report, yes, around the project of life Esidimeni. In fact, the first explanation around cost savings came after they were followed up based on the response they gave to the legislation.
Do you have those figures?
From the top of my head, no.
When can we get them?
I heard Justice saying I'll have to come back tomorrow, so I will get them and bring them tomorrow.
So I suppose you wouldn't know how much was used on the budget, on the amount that would have been allocated for this project. If the whole amount was used or an X amount was used, you wouldn't know at this stage. You wouldn't also know how much was allocated to each NGO.
No.
Maybe as you prepare, maybe as you take your notes, if you could consider also taking those facts, as well as how much was given to each NGO and how much was left, if any, of the budgeted amount, and how much was saved in relation to what was being paid at Life Esidimeni.
Are we talking about how much was budgeted For NGOs, or how much was spent?
How much was budgeted for the mental health marathon project, Justice? How much was spent on each NGO, and how much was allocated for
Okay,
each NGO?
let's take a few steps, Council. Is there ordinarily a budget for a department, a provincial department like a Department of Health?
Yes, Justice, there is.
And that budget will be discrete, in other words, separate and distinct from the budget of the Premier and of other departments.
Yes, Justice, that's the case.
And is that budget accessible? I mean, for the period that Council is keen on. Is that budget accessible?
Yes, it is accessible, Justice.
Yes,
It
because
is
I would
accessible.
also like to see that and see what had the department budgeted, not as a line item in the overall budget,
Yes.
you know, allocate on other words, on departmental allocation, but the detailed breakdown of what the department was all about financially.
Yes.
Okay? It may be, for instance, that the budget was a hopeless deficit. And they thought if you slashed Esidimeni and a few other things here, the budget would become okay again. So that I think that's where Council is going, and it's a legitimate question to say,
Yes.
can we see the budget of the Department of Health? And you must choose the period, Council.
Yes, I could.
2014, 2015, or 2015, 2016?
It will be 2015, 2016. Justice.
2015, 2016. Very well. Continue with your question.
No, that will be all for now, Justice. I suppose it will depend on the answers that you'll get on the budget.
Yes.
Yes, and also I think of importance
Thanks.
Is for DG to tell us how much was saved in relation to what was being paid at Esidimeni, because the evidence before this arbitration is that the cost was a factor that was considered for this project.
Sure. By looking at the budget, we would know, we can test that assertion against what actually was available
Yes.
to the department.
Yes.
I think it's a good point. Well, the DG can cause the budgets to be given to us without her being called again.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that.
And if the documentation requires further exploration, of course, she can be recalled or the financial officer can be called.
Yes, I could.
Very well.
As chooses the
Well, that
justice.
gets us then back to you, Council Hutamo. But before you do, because I know you're going to let your witness go, and I have a few large questions to ask, as always at this time, which really is the first DG, can we rest peacefully that there is going to be rigorous pursuit of disciplinary procedures against those who have offended, who have breached the law, who have breached duties in our Constitution, and breached just duties of human decency? Can we rest assured that you, the Premier, and you and others are going to pursue this?
Justice, I assure you, we will pursue this. We will pursue it very vigorously. There will be no settlements.
Yeah, because that is quite important. The warnings that we saw, to which Advocate Groenewald referred you to, are quite disheartening.
Yes.
If you put a scale of 118 deaths here and a disciplinary hearing, people plead guilty and they get a warning, a written warning, and they continue with their posts. It's something of concern, as Council raised it with you. We're not going to that territory, are we? Because the public generally doesn't consider that to be adequate accountability.
Yes.
By public officials in particular.
Yeah. I agree with you, Council, Justice, and we support the MEC's referral to the Labour Court for review of these sanctions.
before us, there's been speculation about why the Marathon project was embarked upon.
Yeah.
You've been to the war zone. You've been one of those who have been cleaning up.
Yes.
Why was it embarked upon? To achieve what? And it's an inference. I know you are not the planner,
Yes.
but law works with inferences. We look at all the facts and try and find a rational conclusion consistent with a collection of facts. What inference you say we ought to make or that you have made?
Justice, the inference we draw as the Premier's office is that this was ill-advised, should not have been done. We haven't even achieved what we, as the Department of Health, set out to achieve. It was handled in such an inhumane manner. It should just not have been done. I sadly sit here and I cannot in my head rationalize what is it that we sought to achieve. We claim deinstitutionalization, we institutionalized in obscure institutions. We claim cost saving. The amount spent ultimately is much higher than any costs that could have been saved or that were saved, if anywhere. It is just one of those that says that when we do our work as government officials, we must remember that we are dealing with human lives. We must treat human lives with the respect and the dignity that the Constitution awards, and we must take ourselves a little bit more seriously than we have demonstrated in the way this project was implemented.
Have you come to know which was the real purpose? There seem to be two things that the Ombudsman talked about: deinstitutionalization, or in other words, resorting to public health care, and the other end being costs. Is any of those two purposes a valid purpose? And if it is, was it validly implemented here?
Justice, I cannot see that based on the facts. If you look at the costs, in the end, more costs were spent. Where can anybody be looked after at anything less than 320, which already is very lean? The facts do not bear out the department's intention of saving costs. I haven't seen any numbers that show a business case that clearly demonstrates a possible cost savings.
You know, the Ombudsman told us that what the department spends at existing state institutions per patient is much higher than what it spent as Esidimeni.
Yes.
And that challenges the notion that this was a cost saving.
Yes.
Because the government was spending more in any event at Vescopis and Sterkfontein and Cullinan and so on. Do you have any comments about that?
I agree with that observation, Justice. The only comment I'd have is that I'm advised that acute care, which is what those hospitals are, slightly more expensive than rehabilitative centers. However, rather spend money looking after people who need the service than say you're saving money and then risk lives in the manner that we have risked lives here. And on the concept of deinstitutionalization, it's just, which DG Matsosa says is not in the policy document. It's about community-based care for those people with mental disabilities or intellectual disabilities. If we are going to do that, there are clear steps that are stipulated in the national policy, in the Act. None of that seems to have been present in this instance. Worse still, people were put in facilities which are essentially institutions still. So you deinstitutionalize into other institutions. In this particular instance, even more difficult to access for the families without making sure that those institutions have got capacity to look after these patients. On top of it, you do not transfer funds in time for these newly established institutions. This project can never be defended on any rational grounds.
And the agency, DG, what was it about? Well, why was agency such a big thing in this project?
I was unable to glean what the agency was about, Justice, from the documents that were submitted, from the way it was implemented, from where we are sitting. It's not quite possible to see. So even if there was an Auditor General finding, the Auditor General often gives you time. An Auditor General never instructs you to go compromise service delivery for costs. He says you are given X amount of money, manage it effectively. If it had been brought to our attention that this potential cost saving that would compromise service delivery, we could never have agreed with it. We would never have agreed with it.
Yes. Well, I think we've come to a point where you won't be recalled tomorrow. I think we've come to the end of the road. But I turn it over to you. You're entitled to say what you want to say. We know the Premier is still coming and the Minister of National Department of Health, and you are basically an executive. But if you want to say anything else, you are welcome.
Thank you, Justice. I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to the families that were involved in this unfortunate incident. The loss of life was not called for, was not necessary. The inconvenience, the pain, and the suffering was not justified. As an official of Gauteng government, I'm not proud of our record and our performance in this project. We hope that you will find it within your hearts to forgive us for the misstep. We have tried on discovering that this thing has happened to make sure that we make good where we misstepped. Misstep we did in a bad way, in a tragic way, and we would hope that you would be able to forgive us for this. Thank you.
DG, thank you, and I just want to say for my part, your role, I've worked with you a bit in preparation of this process, and you've been very dedicated, and I know you are at the height of your sincerity. But thank you for the work you've done, and we must continue to work.
Yes.
We can't say Batupili and put Batu last. We really cannot do that. But I know you are committed, and you have been working very hard around these issues.
Thank you, Justice.
Thank
you, Justice.
You are excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perhaps, of course, your work is not over. You're going to work quite hard. When the determination and the compensation is fixed,
Yes.
you're the one who's going to find the money, right?
Yes, Justice.
And make sure that the money is available.
And make sure that is available and
it's
paid
paid
on time.
out.
Yes.
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Justice.
we're going to resume, as always, tomorrow at 9:30. We adjourn now.
That's what I took in my